So, for the young folk today, we're still continuing on this topic of friendship. However, let's talk about friendship as it relates to loneliness. Now, loneliness is something everyone experiences, and everyone experiences it to different degrees. And it's not it's not necessarily something to be avoided, but it maybe is a symptom. It maybe is the result of something else. And guess what? Loneliness may not be the result of other people being bad friends. So, as we talk about friendship and loneliness right here, I think it's really important. We need to talk about three new terms. And for some of you young folk, these might be new terms to you. But I think that these will be very helpful. Okay? And whether you are younger or older, it doesn't matter. All of these statements are relatively true, and they actually come from the Christian tradition. From within Christianity, we actually have had conversations about, well, you'll see. So let's do the first three definitions I have to share, and then we'll talk about that in relationship to loneliness. Okay, here we go. First up, you have a shadow self. Now, when I say a shadow self, I'm being poetic when I say that. That's what I mean. Your shadow self are the things about you that you don't want to see and that you don't want anyone else to see. These are the things about you of which you don't want to acknowledge or look at, and you hope that no one else acknowledges or looks at. So this could be you don't want to see that you're really cranky in the morning. You don't want to see that you can be a jerk when you're hangry, right? Hungry and angry at the same time. And so that might be a part of the shadow cast by your personality. It's the kind of the dark side, I guess you could say. But the shadow self is very important because as we ignore and deny and not want to look at that shadow stuff and hope that nobody else sees it, we then are prone to do this: create a false self. Now, the false self is the version of you that you kind of create that hopefully can kind of cover and block other people from seeing your shadow stuff. And so sometimes, let's say your shadow stuff is that you don't know if you have something good to give to the world. And so you have some self-doubt, you know? Well, in the midst of that self-doubt and that shadow stuff you don't want to admit, you might put on a really big personality, trying to hope that you can block people from seeing that you don't really know if you have something to give to the world. And so this can take a lot of forms. This can be people when they have really, really crazy hair, like a mohawk or something. I love mohawks. Don't think me wrong. Like I've had mohawks in the past. But think about people that go through really extreme measures in order to prove to other people that they have something worthwhile, rather than just sit back and be exactly who they are. And so you can see that. Some people, you spend time around them and you think, oh my gosh, you're just a fake person. Who's the real you, right? Well, let's go to the third one. Instead of living from your false self that's usually trying to cover for your shadow self, what if you were to be your true self? Now, it's proven across the studies that when you're a teenager, the most important question is actually, who am I? Now, other decades of life will answer that question as well, but they'll answer it in a different way. But right now, your most important question to answer in your teenage years is, who am I? And it's really difficult because to be your true and authentic self is actually really difficult, because it means that you stop presenting a false version of yourself. You stop being fake. You take off the masks and you just be who you actually are. By the way, the word hypocrite it's a reference towards having a mask on. Actually, also the word persona means mask. And so there are some people that have on a persona. There are some people that like to be hypocrites and present a theater version of themselves rather than being their true self, take off a mask. All of us have this lifelong task of living from our true self rather than our big and blusterous false self that's trying to cover for our shadow self. What do you think it means when Jesus says in Matthew's gospel, "Depart from me, I never knew you"? I think it's entirely possible to even come to church, to even come to faith, and bring your false self, thinking that God will love the false version of you, but actually God says, I want to get to know the true you. So what does this have to do with loneliness? Well, like I said, loneliness may not be a result of other people being bad friends. Loneliness might actually be a result of not being our true selves. Loneliness can actually be a result of not letting other people get to know our true self. Maybe loneliness is a symptom of us living from our false self for too long and knowing on a deep soul level that other people only really knew our false self rather than our true self. So here's a thought. If you want to get rid of loneliness, and I mean this seriously, the thing you have to do is let other people get to know your true self. That's it. Loneliness is actually a result of people not knowing each other. It doesn't mean that you have to be popular. It doesn't mean that you surround yourself with like 100 people, because you can be in a crowd of 100 people who are all living from their persona and not being their true self. And so that way you can be lonely in a crowd of 100. So in the midst of all of this, I actually think it's God's desire that we take off our personas, we stop being hypocrites, we start acknowledging the stuff that we don't want to look at, that we don't want other people to look at, and maybe start to tell other people, like, listen, this is who I truly am. This is my good stuff, this is my bad stuff. And maybe in the midst of that gift of giving to one another our true selves, maybe that's how we overcome loneliness in the name of Jesus. Because God calls all of us to community. And if you've been lonely during COVID times, I understand. But maybe this past year means that we all learn how to give our true self to one another. Even if it's over Zoom, even if it's just through a porch visit, even if it's just through other ways, let's lean into giving our true self to one another, just like God gave his true self to us in Jesus of Nazareth. That's it. That's all for today. Have a lovely week.